come towards me. So just that, right? Hi there, Julie Hart from Heart to Heart Canine. I'm going to talk about a common leash technique, which is commonly called pressure release, but I call it tension release because we're actually putting tension on the leash, not pressure. I use this technique quite a bit to get fearful and feral dogs to walk on a leash, but it can also be beneficial for you to use with maybe your dog is resistant on a leash or doesn't want to get in the car or something like that. This technique can help you achieve that. And we've all seen the dogs on, social media being drugged by a leash and they're refusing to get up and walk. So this technique can help with that too. I'm being assisted by my foster dog, Toby. Toby used to be feral, but the shelter had worked with him a little, and he was only slightly fearful when I got him. He's had a little leash training, but not a ton. I'm going to use him to demonstrate how to do tension release properly, to get a dog to move with you and understand that the leash means to follow the handler. And it builds a lot of confidence because, especially with fearful and feral dogs, they learn that they have control over interaction with a human. And they learn how to turn off discomfort and move towards comfort, which is usually towards the person. And in turn, they're learning how to walk on a leash and having a very clear conversation. And also to teach dogs that when they feel tension on the leash, if they move in the direction the tension is coming from, that tension will go away. I'll also cover a couple of common mistakes that I see people doing when trying to do this process to get a dog to walk on a leash. What I want to achieve is that Toby will feel slight tension on the leash, and then when he moves towards me, that tension will automatically release because he's moving towards me. Right here. But I also want to drop the leash for myself so that I can accentuate that release of tension so I know it's happening when it needs to. Come here, bud. He's watching my dogs out in the yard. What I try to do is not to pull directly back on the dog. That's not going to work well. That's just going to make them want to pull forward. I try to either pull sideways or forward. And so slight sideways tension. And I just hold it and wait. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to increase the tension you're using. Good boy, buddy. And you just want to use enough so that the leash becomes straight and the dog can slightly feel it. You don't need to use a lot of pressure. And that's one of the things I find most people doing incorrectly is that they start to use more and more tension or just start out with way too much tension. And then the dog is just going to resist or be afraid or shut down because you're just being too rough. So it helps if your shoulders are facing the direction you want the dog to go. Little tension, he's distracted, and then he comes with me and the tension releases. So why does this technique work? It works because this is what's called instrumental learning, which means the dog is automatically in charge of what happens to him. All I'm doing is holding tension on the leash. He has a choice of what to do with that. And because the dog then feels in control of his own destiny, let's say, he will get more confident and learn to trust the person because there's clear communication between me and the dog. So if I was, let's say, holding tension on like this and then not releasing it, there's no contrast there. That's not clear communication. What we want is very clear communication with the dog that when you come with me, you don't feel tension on the leash. Another thing I see people do is to make this almost mechanical without watching the dog and concerned about actually teaching the dog things. So what I mean by that is they'll do this type of thing. Or they'll do, something like this. And even if the dog isn't following me, I don't want to just pull and release for random reasons, or because I think I should, or because it's the timing I want. I have to do it in accordance with the dog's behavior. So, Toby, come here, buddy. Good boy. Good boy, buddy. So, again, I'm always very aware of the dog. It's better if you do this in a quiet place, but I'm aware of what the dog is doing. And I'm making sure that I'm in tune with when that dog is moving any little piece of his body towards me when it has to do with a very fearful dog. So I can then release the tension and tell him, yes, that's good. That's what I want. So this is a technique that I learned from Nelson Hodges. I'm teaching Toby about leash tension, pressure, and what it means when he feels it is he needs to come back towards where the tension is being applied to release that, because he really doesn't understand this from my dogs. So I need to teach him about tension, release, how to relieve it, right? This is an example of tension release and what it looks like when you're transforming it into a walk. This would be a more advanced state of the basic leash technique taught in this video. The concept is still the same, that Toby feels a little leash tension when he goes away from me, and then we start walking and the tension is relieved when he comes with me. If you guys can tell by the video, it's always better to feel it in the leash, but very little tension is needed to teach him to come towards me. So just that, right? And I'm also facing the way I want him to go. So as soon as he turns back towards me and releases the pressure, then we start moving again. Good boy. Good job, buddy. Good job. Good job. This is a feral Doberman that was trapped running around Albuquerque, and he is just learning to understand very slight tension on the leash to move forward when he feels it. And you notice just the tiny movements that is allowing me to release the tension on the leash. This is the beginning of a process with a feral dog. You can see how quickly I try to release the tension because he's not moving that much towards me. And also that it has to be in sync with him moving. Notice too, I'm using a long line to give him more space from me. And again, just a tiny movement of his foot is getting a release of the tension. Negative reinforcement is super powerful for feral dogs because there really aren't a lot of choices. They won't take food, they don't want to be touched, and they won't play with toys. And I don't have to be facing the dog to do this. So if I'm facing a dog head on like this, I'm actually telling him to stop. Don't come towards me. So you don't want to do that. You want to encourage the dog to follow you, which is when you face the way you want to go. Hi, Shar. Come on, bud. To get fearful and feral dogs to understand the leash, they get to learn that they can succeed. It uses instrumental learning. It uses negative reinforcement, which means it's going to get more of the behavior that I want. And it builds the dog's confidence and trust in me if it's done properly and I'm paying attention to the dog and not just doing it on my time clock. Kennel, but maybe not. This is another example of a feral dog at the shelter. Here, a little tension on the leash. He puts up a little resistance and then moves forward and gets immediate release of tension on the leash. A little bit later in the session, this is how he's doing. He's walking several steps at a time, so things are going well. If you want to learn more about how I rehabilitate fearful and feral dogs or how I get them to walk on a leash, I have online learning with actual feral dogs on a leash showing you the real deal and how it happens and explain the process. And you can either join my online subscription for that, or you can purchase the leash walking videos a la carte if that suits you better. With my videos, you can learn how to help fearful and feral dogs rehab, train, and thrive. Thanks for watching, and I hope this helps your leash communication with your own dog. And thanks to Toby for being my demonstration dog today.